A few weeks ago, I went to visit my family in Amsterdam. It was wonderful for my children to meet my 30 Dutch cousins. And of course, as I'm sure all of you are maybe thinking, yes, I was nervous to visit Europe with all the anti-Semitism I was reading about. I was happy to say that our trip was delightful and we mostly felt very safe. The day before we left, however, my husband Joe and I saw a very troubling poster, and I was almost relieved that my children don't know how to read yet. I'll spare you the details, but the image was quite horrific and the words were damaging. The poster was sponsored by BDS, Boycott, Divest, and Sanction Israel, an anti-Semitic organization who masks itself as standing up for Palestinian rights. Our hearts sank, and in that moment, we chose to tear the poster down ourselves. It took nearly 20 minutes to strip away the hateful words, peeling them off piece by piece, one glued tighter than the other, a message in itself about how stubborn hatred can be. A Dutch man came over and asked us why we were tearing the poster down. The Palestinians are suffering after all, he argued. Yes, they are, I said. But this poster wasn't put up to help Palestinians. It was to promote hatred of Jews, masked as helping Palestinians. That is not the same. For the next 20 minutes, this Dutch man and I had a heated and mostly respectful conversation about our differences. And how could I not engage with this man? My 18-year-old Israeli niece was standing to my left, whose army draft is set for this coming December 18th, 2025. And to my right was my 17-year-old nephew, her brother, who will enlist next year. I begin with this story for two reasons. First, to say that I will not stand by when Jewish hatred hides behind another name. When I see it, I will call it out for what it is, hatred of Jews, and I will not allow it to be excused or disguised. And I strongly hope that you will consider joining me in this endeavor. Secondly, my conversation with the Dutch man was difficult, and some moments were really painful, but it mattered. By the end, we reached a shared truth that the lives of innocent people, Israeli and Palestinian alike, are precious, and their loss is heartbreaking. I also hope I was able to draw a clearer line for him between being pro-Palestinian and crossing over into hatred of Jews. Like me, you can be pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian. Hating one or the other just perpetuates hates. Real dialogue is serious work. My conversation was with a stranger this time, but I've had to have these difficult conversations and exchanges with people who are much closer to me. Relationships are complex and they demand respect at their core. And meaningful relationships remind us that disagreement does not signal an end to a relationship, but rather opens the door to an exchange of thoughtful ideas. But let me be very absolutely clear, anti-Semitism is not disagreement. It is not hard debate. It is the opposite. It is a lie that breeds violence and destruction. And this morning, I'd like to face that corrupt distortion head on. Over the past year, I've listened to students, to scholars, and have been deeply shaped by the reflections of writer Dara Horn, who served on an anti-Semitism advisory group at Harvard after October 7th, and then later she testified before Congress. The story many of us were told about college campuses was that these were debates about free speech and criticism of Israel. But the Jewish students flooding Horn's inbox aren't complaining about chance or uncomfortable ideas. They are reporting about dorm rooms vandalized, professors ejecting Israelis from class, harassment, spit, threats, signs facing inward into their window reading, "F the Jews." That's not dialogue. That is targeted hate. And Horn makes a really crucial point. Anti-Semitism isn't merely a prejudice, it is a lie. It is a big lie that recycles itself in every era. Sometimes it says that Jews poison the well, sometimes it says Jews control banks, and today it says that a people indigenous to the land of Israel are colonizers. The content of the lie shifts, the function is the same: to render Jews the obstacle to whatever a society values most, and therefore to mark us as a collective that should not exist. Horn traces one of today's slogans directly to Soviet propaganda. After the Six-Day War in 1967, when Arab armies armed and trained by the Soviets lost to Israel, the Soviet Union had to explain away the defeat of its allies. Their answer was a global campaign. Zionism is racism. Zionism is genocide. Zionism is apartheid. Sound familiar, friends? But Zionism, in truth, is nothing more and nothing less than the Jewish people's movement for self-determination in our ancestral homeland. Zionism itself was not exotic. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as empires crumbled, countless national movements emerged. India, Pakistan, Greece, Turkey, Hungary, dozens more. And each of those involved upheavals, partitions, and tragedy. Consider India and Pakistan. In 1947, partition unleashed one of the biggest and largest human migrations in history. Over 14 million people displaced, and more than 1 million killed in communal violence. The scars are still felt there today, and no one denies that India and Pakistan exist and that their people have a right to sovereignty. The world accepted these outcomes even when born in blood and exile. Consider Greece and Turkey. In 1923, after years of war, the Treaty of Lausanne forced a massive population exchange. Over 1 million Greeks expelled from Turkey, and hundreds and thousands of Muslims uprooted from Greece. Communities were shattered. Centuries of heritage were lost. The world acknowledged the suffering, yes, but it also accepted the legitimacy of the modern Greek and Turkish states. Nations endured, sovereignty respected. And let us not forget our own story in that period. From 1948 onward, nearly 1 million Jews were expelled or forced to flee from the Middle East and North African countries: Egypt, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, Syria, and my parents, Morocco, Tunisia. Families who lived there for centuries in Baghdad and Cairo or Damascus left their homes, their businesses, cemeteries, carrying little more than their memories. They arrived to Israel as refugees and to other countries, often penniless, yet determined to begin again. Their displacement, like those in India, Pakistan, Greece, and Turkey, was tragic and irreversible. And yet, while the world acknowledges the upheavals of others, it has too often ignored or erased this chapter of Jewish history. But when Jews, after centuries of persecution and exile, returned to their homeland and built a democratic state nonetheless, that same world suddenly deemed our sovereignty suspect and our legitimacy negotiable. So what does that mean for us? Horn tells the story of a Jewish student who sat silent while a classmate made anti-Semitic remarks. Later, the student confided, "I wish I had said something, but I was afraid of being mocked or attacked online." And Horn said to her, "You are not thinking long-term enough." Yes, there is a cost to speaking, but there is also a cost to silence. By staying quiet, you cede the room to those who hate you, and you lose the chance to discover who's actually on your side. The book of Proverbs teaches, "Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute." Open your mouth, judge righteously, champion the poor and the needy. In other words, silence is never neutral. To stay quiet is to leave the vulnerable defenseless. To speak, even when afraid, is to step into covenantal responsibility. Dara Horn tells of lectures where a heckler would interrupt, and after she answered, the person would say, "I never thought about it that way before." That moment might seem small, but it is Proverbs come alive. The act of opening one's mouth creates possibility. It shows us that ignorance is often more common than malice, and that one voice, just one voice, can shift a room. And very possibly, maybe that voice is yours. And that is why silence is so dangerous. Ignorance can be educated, lies can be unmasked, but hatred left unchallenged curdles into poison. Most people are not haters. They are uncertain. They can be educated. Our tradition says again and again, "Chazak ve'ematz," be strong and courageous. Your integrity will outlast the heat of the moment, and your courage will draw unexpected friends to your side. We must stop being so comfortable with hatred. We cannot apologize for existing, and we cannot allow others to dictate our story. Lo amut ki elech va'asaper ma'aseya. I shall not die, but live, and I shall proclaim the deeds of God, says our Psalms. That is our inheritance, to live as Jews openly and unapologetically, to define Judaism by our covenant, not by the lies that others tell about us. Last week, I heard Rabbi Oded Mazor of Kol HaNeshama in Jerusalem speak to Reform rabbis in America. He shared a story that brought so much joy to my heart. He describes a language cafe that was established 2 months after October 7th, 2023, that brings Palestinians from East Jerusalem and Jews from West Jerusalem to study Arabic, Hebrew, and English face to face. These people are all Israeli, but you never hear anyone reporting that there are Palestinian Israelis because that doesn't fit the apartheid ideology. These people all sit together for hours every 2 weeks, practicing the different languages, but more than that, learning each other's cultural vocabulary. It saddens me deeply that these stories never make the headlines, because if they did, maybe we could encourage peaceful outcomes. There are many stories like this, and it is these occurrences that we need to focus on and create in our own communities, because where our attention goes, our energy flows. And these are the days of awe. And the question before us is simple. What must change? Tshuva calls us to turn inward, not to excuse evil, but to root out the fears and silences that shrink our souls. Rosh Hashanah is the only holiday that occurs on the first of the month. That means that the moon is barely seen. It's a thin crescent. We renew the year in the darkest part of the month. And that is when we first hear the call to shofar, telling our souls to awake. It is in that moment that we breathe strength into our lungs, courage into our soul, and allow the power of change to wash over our entire selves. Because it is in that darkest moment where we can give birth to light. Dara Horn writes that one revolutionary Jewish idea is hope, and that in America, the future we choose is up to us. If you look around and there's no one leading the way you believe there should be, that means the leader is you. So here is our charge. Learn deeply so you can speak clearly. You don't have to know everything to stand up. Engage in a way that you know how to do and share your understanding. And if you fear speaking, remember that silence also has a cost. Be unapologetically, generously Jewish. Infuse Judaism into every fabric of your daily life. When you make a donation, give in multiples of 18, because life itself is sacred. When you show up with honesty, kindness, or a fierce work ethic, let others know that you live this way because your tradition demands it of you. When your children go to school, send apples, honey, dreidels, donuts, matzah for the whole class, and tell the story behind each gift, because these small gestures plant roots of pride. Educate yourself intentionally. Start a Jewish book club. Choose a podcast to listen to with a friend or a family member and talk about it once a week, once a month. Around your dinner table, take 5 minutes to share something new you learned about Judaism. Sing together, study together, argue together. And when the day is done, say the Shema before you go to sleep, wrapping yourself in the words that have carried our people for thousands of years. In these ways, large and small, public and private, we make Judaism visible, not something to hide, but as a source of joy, strength, and light. Our tradition puts such a focus on distinction, day from night, Shabbat, the rest of the week. And as we bring forth the new year, what distinctions will you make in preserving our story for the next generation? Enough of the silence, enough of the discomfort and fear of consequence, enough of the shrinking back, enough accepting small remarks that have so much behind their words, enough compromising our Jewishness, enough. We are not a people of apologies. We're the people who stood at Sinai, who carried Torah through exile, who rebuilt from ashes again and again and again and again and again. We are the people who put education and community at the forefront of our lives, and we will not apologize for being creative, hardworking, and giving tzedakah. We are here because our ancestors refused to disappear, and now it is our turn. Daniel Weiner has warned us that we made a painful mistake. We taught our children to love justice, but we forgot to teach them to love the Jewish people. We lifted up universal values, but too often neglected the sacred particular, that our fate is bound up with Israel, with our people, with one another. October 7th shattered the illusion that universalism alone could protect us. If our children inherit the ethics of Judaism, but not its spine, we have failed them. Justice without solidarity is fragile. Compassion without covenant collapses. To be unapologetically Jewish means to carry both, to fight for the good of the world, and to know deep in our bones that we are bound first to one another. Without that bond, our story weakens, and with it, we are unbreakable. Do not let others define us. We must define ourselves with pride and with truth. Do not yield the public square. Show up as Jews, visibly, joyfully, courageously. Do not let the lie stand unchallenged. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Your words carry generations behind them. And do not be content with ignorance. Learn, teach, study, so that your courage is rooted in wisdom. The shofar does not whisper. It pierces the air. It demands a response. When you hear it, know that it is calling you to courage, to hope, to life. This is our covenant. To live as Jews openly, boldly, lovingly, to meet hatred, not with retreat, but with strength. To walk into this new year unafraid, our hearts awake and our souls alive. Chazak ve'ematz, be strong and courageous. Gmar chatima tova, may we all be bravely inscribed in the book of life.